What was it like on the set of Little House on the Prairie? The actress who played Michael Landon's wife says it wasn't as wholesome as it seemed.
Guess what me and Andrew found?
Where have you been, young lady? You're late.
Huh?
I asked you where you've been.
Well, I was trying to tell you, me and Andrew.
Fact is, you're late.
Whether you were an
For millions of viewers, Little House on the Prairie was a warm, wholesome window into pioneer life on the American frontier, a show about family, faith, and hardship overcome with love. But peel back the curtain on this beloved series, and you'll find a set that was far messier, far funnier, and occasionally far darker than anything that ever aired on NBC. Today we're digging into the scandals, secrets, and slip-ups that never made it into the final cut, until now. One of the most delightful ironies of the show involved its two most famous rivals, Laura Ingalls and Nellie Oleson. On camera, these two despised each other with the kind of theatrical intensity only a soap opera-style children's drama could produce. Off camera, though, the actresses who played them were practically inseparable. They spent their downtime together, pulled pranks on the crew, and treated the set like their personal playground between takes. It's a classic case of professional actors doing their job so well that audiences never suspected the truth. That same blurred line between fiction and reality extended to Nellie's on-screen husband, Percival. The actor who played him was gay in real life, yet the show leaned hard into a passionate, over-the-top romance between the two characters, one that reportedly became something of an inside joke among the cast. The actors playing Nellie and Percival apparently enjoyed hemming up their on-screen chemistry specifically to fluster their younger, more innocent castmate who played Laura, whose real romance with Al Manzo felt tame and awkward by comparison. Behind the sunny, God-fearing image of the Ingalls family lurked a production culture that, by several cast accounts, ran on considerably more than lemonade. Multiple memoirs from cast members describe heavy alcohol consumption among crew members, with entire cases of beer disappearing during particularly grueling shoot days. The show's lead actor, who also directed and produced much of the series, was singled out in more than one memoir as someone who drank steadily throughout the day, often starting with a spiked coffee in the morning. For years, most people on set had no idea just how much he was consuming, since he was careful to keep it hidden, but eventually, the truth became impossible to ignore. Here's a twist most casual fans never clocked. The actor who played the deeply Christian, Bible-quoting patriarch of the Ingalls family was actually Jewish in real life. Born under a different name entirely, he adopted his famous stage name early in his career and built an image steeped in wholesome, church-going Americana, despite having a Jewish father and a Catholic mother, and identifying more with Jewish cultural heritage than with any organized religion. He reportedly believed in God in a general sense, but never subscribed to a specific faith, which makes his decades of playing television's most famous frontier Christian something of a delicious irony. Speaking of the leading man, his thick, curly, dark hair became one of the most recognizable features on television in the 1970s and 80s. What fans didn't know is that his natural hair color was a much duller, ashy brown. The rich brunette look was achieved entirely through dye, touched up regularly by professional colorists. The upkeep wasn't always smooth sailing, either. As gray hairs crept in, the combination of studio lighting and natural sunlight sometimes caused his dyed job to shift into an unfortunate purplish tint, forcing the production to call in extra colorists just to keep his look consistent from episode to episode. For a show remembered as gentle, feel-good television, Little House tackled subject matter that was shockingly bold for its era. Storylines touched on sexual assault, addiction, racism, adoption, and disability at a time when most family programming avoided such topics entirely. In hindsight, the show was arguably ahead of the curve, using its frontier setting as a Trojan horse to sneak serious social commentary into living rooms across America. On screen, Nellie's little brother Willie was a scheming troublemaker. In real life, the young actor who played him was the adopted brother of the actress who played Laura, and their relationship outside the show ended up far more complicated than anything scripted. The two eventually drifted apart and became estranged as adults. One went on to build a career in finance as a stockbroker, while the other continued acting and later became deeply involved in advocacy work, even serving as president of a major actors union and briefly running for a congressional seat before health issues forced her to step back from the race. While Laura and Nellie's rivalry was all performance, the tension between Laura and her on-screen sister Mary was reportedly very real. The two young actresses simply did not get along, and their mutual dislike was apparently strong enough that it made other people on set uncomfortable being around them. Despite playing loving sisters for nearly a decade, their off-screen relationship never improved, a rare case where the drama audiences saw on screen was arguably tamer than what was happening between takes. Contrary to what some fans assume, Walnut Grove wasn't a fictional invention dreamed up purely for television. It's a real town in Minnesota, and the author whose books inspired the series actually spent part of her childhood there. The show took considerable creative liberties in blending different locations and timelines from her life into a single, simplified narrative. But the emotional core, a family carving out a life in an unforgiving landscape, was rooted in genuine pioneer history. Despite the sometimes heavy themes and the darker undercurrents behind the scenes, the set apparently had no shortage of laughter. The lead actor was famously known as a relentless prankster. One especially memorable story involves the youngest cast members catching frogs down by a nearby creek during breaks and bringing them back to torment their co-star, who would gleefully turn the tables by hiding the frogs in his own mouth and startling unsuspecting crew members by letting the amphibians leap out mid-conversation. Other pranks were less amphibian-based and more juvenile, including a memorable incident involving plastic wrap stretched over a toilet seat. Re-watch a few episodes with a critical eye, and the cracks in the show's historical accuracy start to show. Female characters can be spotted wearing bras decades before the garment was actually invented. Hairstyles occasionally look more like something from a 1970s salon than an 1880s farmhouse. A famous fried chicken franchise founder makes an anachronistic cameo in a storyline set roughly 2 decades before he was even born. A family quilt seems to teleport between different beds and different households throughout the series, suggesting the prop department wasn't always tracking continuity closely. And in one dramatic train sequence, eagle-eyed viewers can catch a stunt dummy being tossed from the moving train instead of an actual stuntman, landing with a noticeably unnatural thud in the grass. There's also the strange case of noisy tree branches rustling outside a bedroom window in a couple of episodes, despite no such tree actually existing near the house in any other scene, a telltale sign of recycled sound effects or stock footage patched into the production. Fans who've watched the series closely have long joked about Laura's pregnancy timeline, which somehow stretched across more than a full year of in-show time without ever quite resolving on schedule, a scheduling and writing quirk that becomes obvious once you start counting the seasons. The show's final episode jumps forward to the early 1900s, more than a decade after the events of the previous season. Logically, characters who were adults in earlier seasons should have visibly aged into their 60s, and the children should have grown into full adults. Instead, nearly everyone on screen looks essentially unchanged, creating one of the more glaring continuity oversights in the entire series, a reminder that television timelines rarely map cleanly onto real ones. Between the real off-screen friendships hidden behind scripted rivalries, the addictions quietly managed behind a wholesome public image, the surprising personal identities of its stars, and the sheer number of bloopers hiding in plain sight, Little House on the Prairie turns out to be a far more complicated production than its gentle, sun-drenched episodes ever let on. It remains a beloved piece of television history precisely because of that tension, a show that dared to tackle real hardship and real emotion, produced by a cast and crew who were navigating plenty of hardship of their own. That's the story behind the story. If you enjoyed this look behind the curtain of one of television's most enduring family dramas, let us know what other classic shows you'd like us to dig into next. Part of what made Little House on the Prairie so enduring wasn't just the writing or the scenery. It was a strange, complicated family that formed behind the cameras. Child actors who spent their formative years together on that set didn't just play siblings. In many ways, they grew up together the way real siblings do, complete with the closeness, the rivalries, and the eventual distance that often comes with adulthood. Some of those bonds never fully healed once the cameras stopped rolling and everyone scattered into separate adult lives. The show's director and leading man in particular seemed to leave an outsized mark on the younger cast members. For at least one young actress, he became something like a substitute father figure during a period when she was missing exactly that kind of presence in her own life. Their relationship reportedly grew close enough that he told her he loved her, as though she were his own daughter. But even that bond wasn't immune to real-world complications. When he ended his marriage to pursue a relationship with a crew member, it caused a serious rift between them that took years and a cancer diagnosis to eventually repair. It's easy to forget, watching the finished episodes, that everything audiences saw was a product of long, exhausting days on a working set in the California heat, standing in for the Minnesota Prairie. Costumes were reused, quilts got shuffled between households without much concern for continuity, and stunt sequences were achieved with whatever practical tricks the budget and the era allowed. Dummies tossed from trains, sound effects looped in for atmosphere, hairstyles that occasionally betrayed the decade the show was actually filmed in rather than the one it was portraying. Maybe that's exactly why the show still holds up. It wasn't a polished, sanitized fantasy of pioneer life. It was made by real, flawed, occasionally chaotic people trying to tell a sincere story about resilience, family, and survival against hardship. The scenes show if you look closely enough, but somehow that only makes the finished product more human, not less. Decades later, fans are still combing through old episodes frame by frame, still trading theories about continuity errors, still swapping stories about what really happened between takes. That kind of devotion doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a show manages to feel real, even when, as we've seen, so much of what happened behind the scenes was anything but simple.